Hey folks, how is everyone doing? We are back again. This is College Football Focus, and we are again hitting on another conference preview. Today, we are going to take a look at the always wild and woolly Mid American Conference. Of course, they typically have kind of a mishmash of everything. They have some really good teams that have beaten power conference teams, and then on the other end, you've got maybe a program or two that might be the worst in college football. So it is always fun to look at the MAC, and today we are going to do that with Alex Scheer from the MAC Sports Connection. He is pretty much dialed into all things MACtion. And Alex, how are you doing today?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Doing well. It's hard to believe that we're already talking about football. It's just a couple months away, and I'm excited, man.
It is, and hard to believe because it's 96 degrees outside
Yes.
that this is not anything like football weather. If everyone else around the country probably baking in the summertime sun. So I, for one, am looking forward to some fall conditions here sooner rather than later. The MAC, we know, is always a fun league to cover, usually has a lot of storylines. This year, for me, it has to be all of the turnover at the head coach position. Five programs, and I guess six if you count Brian Smith being elevated. They have new pilots. None have a higher profile, though, than Eddie George at Bowling Green. I think a lot of people were surprised when the Falcons were able to nab him from Tennessee State after taking them to the playoffs. So he obviously is going to cut a pretty imposing figure up there at BG. Matt Drinkall has cred from his time at Army, and he could be successful. To me, the others have a little bit more of an uphill climb as they are with programs that have not really tasted consistent success. And the other thing that I look for is roster chaos. Outside of a few select schools, most of them have been picked clean by the power conference teams. Those are the two things that kind of stick out to me. What, if anything, do you have to add to the storylines for the MAC?
Well, I think just kind of talking on transfer portal quickly, the portal giveth and the portal taketh, right? You see these guys leave for an opportunity to maybe make some cash, better potential NFL prospects, whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. But in return, the portal gives, and the portal has done a lot of giving. Most notably, Toledo just picked up that running back from Kentucky who was the hero for Ohio State a couple years ago in South
Mm-hmm.
Bend in the Notre Dame game. So the portal is it's the wild wild west, right? I think we
Yeah.
can pretty much unilaterally agree there. But for me, I think that's going to be the big thing. I also think it's interesting. Ohio won their first championship in 56 years. Can they repeat? Can they defend that title? They and be the first team to go back to back since NIU in 2011 and 2012.
Yeah, it's the MAC also is always known for having a different champion. It seems that, like clockwork, maybe there aren't two different teams in the title game, but a different team wins it. And I know um, that was the case certainly when they had the divisional format, and there was just always one. There was almost never a repeat divisional champion. And like you said, NIU, it's been close to 15 years now, so it will be interesting to see if the Bobcats can get it done. I guess let's just get started with teams. We will look first at Akron. The fact to me that Joe Moorhead stuck around, that's got to be considered a small victory. He did have chances to become an OC at some higher profile programs. And the fact that he stuck around to go into a fourth season was a big win, I think, for Akron. Now, I don't think the Zips will be able to go. They're not going to be able to go to the postseason thanks to poor academics, I guess. So they can improve all they want, but they're not going to go to a bowl game. You wonder if that's going to filter into the mindset at some point during the season. Maybe if they're sitting at 5 wins. I mean, Moorhead is good about getting his team to buy in. So maybe it doesn't, but I just wonder with nothing really to play for, I guess, except spoiler, I wonder how good Akron can be this season.
Well, I think you mentioned it right there, playing spoiler. Just because they can't do anything in the postseason. Well, one, I joked when we were doing our preview episode for Akron earlier. that there's a chance Akron goes 12-0 and just shocks everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's just that would be the luck of the Zips this year. But I think to your point, you can absolutely play spoiler and ruin some seasons. If you can knock off a couple of conference opponents, get some big time wins in conference play, yeah, you're not playing for the postseason. But if you finish with a 7-5 season, that's a huge feather in your cap for Akron, a program who hasn't had a winning season since 2015. That's been a decade of losing football, 500 or lower. 2017, they went to the MAC championship, lost to Toledo, and then lost their bowl game. But that is a decade of 500 or lower football. To get your first winning season, even in a non-bowl year, that would be showing signs of going the right direction. And to Akron's credit, at the end of the year, they did win 3 of their last 5
Hmm.
games to finish 4-8, including wins over Kent State and Toledo to wrap up the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, one I guess would be expected, and then the other certainly just sort of came out of the blue. You're looking at that and you're thinking, okay, newspaper has that one wrong. Toledo did not lose to Akron, but they actually did. So that was kind of way to end the season for the Zips. And you're right, playing for momentum and just kind of continuing to build a program. They did show progress last year by winning 4, and they were competitive in games where a year earlier they hadn't been competitive. So it does look like Joe Moorhead is slowly but surely starting to put together something there. And I think that bears watching this year. Ball State, new coach in town, Mike Urimovich. He really did some offensive wonders at Butler. They were always high scoring offense. I think that could be tough to replicate, though, with the rebuild of the offense. Not much back on the offensive line. Kale Kelly, he gets a second chance at quarterback. He's had a couple of position switches, but he is back. And Elijah Jackson, who is a Purdue transfer, he could be a real find at running back. He's one of those 5'8", 5'9" guys, shifty inside, gets lost sometimes behind the offensive line, and then has some home run speed. So he's a guy who maybe could bring some life to the offense. But for Ball State, 5 of the first 8 are on the road. So I'm wondering, it's going to be tough for them to gain confidence.
Well, I think 5 of the first 8 on the road, as you mentioned, but then you've got a great home slate. If you're Ball State, you've got an opportunity for your fans to come out later in the season, kind of make Schumann Stadium a little bit more of an intimidating environment under the regime of a new coach, right? This is an opportunity for Cal Kelly. They've got Quan Magwood, coming back.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great pieces here. Darren Conley, Joey Stemler. This is a team that there are plenty of pieces there to be special. I mean, we've seen them use that special, I guess, Ball State magic, if you will. They've beaten Northern Illinois the last couple of years, games that they probably shouldn't have won, but they've done that. They've found ways to win games that they, again, probably shouldn't win. That they lose the games they should be losing, but there's a lot of talent with this Ball State team. And if Mike can get this going in the right direction, I think it's weird that they're going to have back-to-back coaches whose first name is Mike. Mike New, of course,
Yeah.
the departed coach. But I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens as he kind of transforms this Ball State program into his image and makes it something a little bit more special that that Cardinal fans can be very proud of.
Yeah, I think that they'll be a team to watch next year for the reason that you're talking. I just think
Mm-hmm.
when you bring in a new coach, it invariably takes time. Even if they were there in the spring, it takes time to learn the system. And like I said, with that schedule, from a confidence standpoint, they could be teetering a little bit. But if he can get the players to buy in and say, you know what, this is a marathon, not a sprint, then maybe they can do some things at the end that give them a little bit of momentum heading into next season. Speaking of new coaches, we've got Bowling Green, and I touched on it a little bit in my storylines thing. I don't think there were a lot of people out there who thought that Eddie George was legitimately in the mix. He took Tennessee State to their first playoff berth in 10 years and really did a pretty quick turnaround for them. So when I heard that he was getting the job, it's like, okay, from an Ohio State fan standpoint, great. He's just up the road. He's in the state where he really made himself famous. but he also brings a little bit of cachet to Bowling Green. I mean, Scott Loeffler had stabilized the program some, but he went off to the NFL, and I think it looked like maybe some of that momentum had been gone. And bringing Eddie in, I think, really helped. They got a couple of big, high profile, I guess, from a power conference standpoint, transfers in Drew Pine, quarterback, and tight end Arliss Boardingham,
Mhm.
who all he has to do is step into the huge shadow of Harold Fannin Jr. But they have played at the power conference level. And I think George has created a buzz around the program. And even if the Falcons take a step back this year, because there were a lot of guys who left, I think the future looks really bright for them.
Yeah, so when I saw the Eddie George hire, I was very much in the same boat as you. I'm like, I'm sorry. Did I read that headline correctly? Am I reading this information correctly? I actually got the news a day before it was officially announced.
Mm.
Somebody had sent me a DM, said, "Hey, this has got some real teeth to it. This is something you need to be aware of." And about 2 hours later, Eddie George was landing in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of merit to that. And I just wanted to, to thank the people who shared that with me. But this was about as home run of a hire as you could get. I was talking to somebody earlier. The MAC needed some national splash.
Yeah.
Um, and you hire such a high profile guy such as Eddie George. I don't think I'm going to go as far as to say that he's the Max Deion Sanders, because I don't think he's as uh, it doesn't have as much bravada.
Right.
We'll put it that way. But I do think that he has a great football IQ. He's got a great football mind. He understands the state of Ohio. In fact, fun fact for those who don't know, his first college touchdown was against Bowling Green
Mm-hmm.
back in 1992, I believe.
Yep.
And so, I think there is a tie there, and there's a special tie for him. He has embraced it from everything I've seen. He is excited for the challenge. As you mentioned, Scott Loeffler, phenomenal job, kind of stabilizing the program after the Mike Jinks disastrous
Yeah.
era. And Scott Loeffler, to his credit, was 500 against Toledo. When you can go 500 or better against your biggest rival, who had
Mm-hmm.
owned the rivalry the previous 9 years, I mean, that's a feather in the cap, and that builds a lot of momentum. Losing guys like Harold Fannin Jr., Connor Bazelak, that sucks. But there's a lot of great pieces still on this team. And as you mentioned, Eddie George is bringing in fantastic elements to kind of build off of. I see them kind of middle of the pack, but do not be
Mm-hmm.
surprised to see them pull off really some serious wins or two.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of the whole splash and face of the league. And I think the Dion comparison isn't bad in that he is certainly a huge name. I like to say that Eddie has low key confidence. He doesn't
Hmm.
tell people what he knows or what he can do. He just kind of goes out and does it, but he knows in the back of his mind that he can get stuff done. And I think the evidence is Tennessee State, which had been kind of a foundering program, and he turned them around in 4 years and got them to the FCS playoff. So
Right.
certainly feather in the cap for the folks at Bowling Green. Moving on to one of the teams that I'm really fascinated by. This is a team I'm watching closely. Um, the Bulls have the best defense in the conference. Red Murdoch and Deion Crawford. Red Murdoch, full disclosure, I do have as one of my All Americans this season. I'm going to be releasing those teams probably at the beginning of July, but Red Murdoch is on one of the three All American units. Deion Crawford is no slouch behind him. Kobe Stewart on the edge is outstanding. To me, it's going to come down to whether the offense can carry its share of the freight. That unit ranked 110th nationally throwing the ball last year. And maybe I'm in the minority. I just think Taquan Roberson has been wildly inconsistent in the times that he has been in lineups and been healthy. Now, the offensive line is nails. There are playmakers at the skill positions. They do close it with Miami and Ohio back to back. That's going to be a challenge, but they missed Toledo. Watch the opener at Minnesota to get a gauge on whether they're for real. I would not be all that shocked if Buffalo went in there and upset the Big Ten apple cart.
That would be a massive feather in Buffalo's cap to start the year. Again, a 9-4 season under Pete Lembeau last year, nothing to sneeze at. They've actually won 4 bowl games in a row,
Hmm.
dating back to 2020. They missed the 2023 bowl game, but they rebounded and won last year. I've kind of got them a little bit as a dark horse, namely because they do have a tough end of the regular season
Right.
with Miami and Ohio. But if they can pull off one of those wins, they could absolutely sneak into Detroit for their first MAC championship appearance since 2020. I really, really like Aljay Henderson coming back,
Yes.
the running back, and then CJ Agbana. Just he's going to have a little bit of competition from Taquan Robertson from, I believe, Kansas State.
Hmm.
But I really think that this is going to be an offense you're going to see them take a step forward. They're going to be a little bit better. The defense, I think the defense probably takes a little bit of a step back, but this offense is going to be a little bit better. But now these are guys Pete Lembeau has groomed and kind of grown over the last year. Now, year 2, this is where things are really settling. You're not refiguring out this new offense. You got a few pieces you're still trying to shore up, but you're all right. We're settling into this thing. So, to your point on all the other coaches that are in year 1, this is the year 2 coaching regime that I'm really excited to watch.
Yeah, and the job that Pete Lembo did, especially, there were very few expectations for Buffalo last
Mm-hmm.
season, and they just kind of went out and had an outstanding season. So they're one I definitely want to watch. Central Michigan is another one of those teams with a new head coach. Matt Drinkall, of course, was an assistant OC at Army, which maybe tells people the identity that Central Michigan is going to have. They were always kind of inconsistent under Jim McElwain.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that under Drinkall, you're gonna see kind of a power rushing attack, a bruising ground game. Trey Cornist, who is probably going to be the lead back, he's a bigger guy, about 215 or 220. I don't know that you're going to see kind of like the option attack that Army runs, but I do think you're going to see them keep it on the ground quite a bit. Now, if the roster is not battered after opening with San Jose State, Pitt, and Michigan, there is a chance for them to do something. I think the defense should be good enough. They have some really good linebackers, and that's going
Mm-hmm.
to kind of keep them viable as the offense finds its feet. Now, getting to a bowl is not going to be easy, but it seems viable. The only caveat is that CMU has only won 13 games over the last 3 seasons. So they kind of have to shake the culture of we're not quite good enough. They have to have some sort of statement win early, I think, to maybe get the ball rolling.
Well, I think it's clear that the statement win is probably not going to be Michigan. There
Right.
seems to be a little bad blood between the two programs with the whole Connor Stallions thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think that this is an opportunity for Central Michigan. Matthew Drinkle, great football mind. A rising star in college football coaching. But I think that you're going to see a lot heavier of a run game, and
Mm-hmm.
who better to do that than to bring back your star, Marion Lukes?
Right.
That right there is going to be the key cog in this ground attack. I believe the running back from Tulane, Trey Cornished.
Right.
I probably have that wrong. Cornist. Sorry.
Correct.
But he's going to be a huge depth piece. They've got a couple big offensive linemen coming in from the SCS level. I think your big games, if you're Central Michigan, are probably Akron, because now you're kind of really getting into conference play. You're kind of figuring things out. It's your first conference test. But then I think Toledo is kind of their other big contest. That's been a little bit of a chippy rivalry. No pun intended to the Chippewas.
Right.
But Toledo, has kind of had the better end of that. It'll be really interesting to see what Drinkle does in kind of the meat of a MAC football schedule. So I'm really excited to see what this team does.
Yeah, they're definitely one. There's just, again, so many interesting storylines that even in a week when it seems like the games aren't good, there's at least some subplots that will keep people, I guess, interested. Eastern Michigan, they are not a team with a new coach. Chris Creighton has shown that he is one of the best year in and year out. He often gets the Eagles to kind of punch above their weight.
Mm.
They did only win 5 last year, but they did have 3 one-score losses, including a heartbreaker to Toledo. So that shows they can be competitive. But what you really have to love is when a former player gives back. And in this case, it's Max Crosby. He, of course, is playing for the Oakland Raiders. He's agreed to be their assistant GM, and he's going to work on helping out with NIL and recruiting. So that's something that you can sell to recruits. It's like, look, we've got an NFL guy right here. He knows what it takes to get there. And that may help with the talent base over the next few seasons, just because Eastern has really been fortifying its roster a lot with transfer portal guys. One of those guys this year is Noah Kim, who could be probably going to be the starting quarterback. But they do have an offensive line that's largely intact. I love Mickey Rilowinski. He is probably not only an all-MAC talent on the offensive line, but he could be an All-American. So there are some pieces in place. I do wonder, Noah Kim has kind of bounced around and has been inconsistent. And if he can't show some consistency, then I think Eastern might be right around that 5 or 6 win mark again this year, when they probably could take a step beyond that.
Well, and it's so interesting. Last year, you know, when we were in the middle of October, Eastern Michigan had 4 wins. They were 4-2 middle of October. And if you would have told me then that they were going to miss a bowl game, I probably would have laughed at you. If you would have told me that they were going to lose 5 of their last 6, 5 in a row, I would have laughed at you. I'm like, there's no way. They've got Akron. They've got Toledo, who is struggling. They've got Buffalo, who surprised people. But this is a program, and all credit to Chris Creighton. That man has poured everything into this program. Like like you said, he's done so much. And I don't think his record reflects just what he's done at Eastern Michigan. Right. I think he's 57-75 overall, but he has turned them from a perennial MAC cellar dweller into a competitive team. I mean, just 2 years ago, they were knocking on the door of playing in the MAC championship. So maybe 3 years ago, sorry, but they have done a great job of kind of building. But I think you're right. There's a lot of talent on this program. You bring in a guy like Max Crosby to be the GM and to help with all of that kind of stuff. That is a name people know, and people love to go to things they're familiar with, right? You know, people are drawn to those things. So when you get an NFL star such as Max Crosby to come back and support his alma mater the way he's planning on it, that's going to be a huge boost for this program, and just for national attention. That's going to bring a lot of eyes to Ypsilanti. Not as many as there are in Ann Arbor, but there's going to be a lot of eyes in Washtenaw County, and it's going to be between those 2 campuses, just 6 miles apart.
And you can bet that every time they're on TV, that facet is going to get mentioned. So even people who don't know about it are going to learn about it. So so that is a kudos. Just like Eddie George at Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan is going to have something it can hang its hat on every week. Kent State, I would say the less said about them, the better, but we do need to preview all of the teams. I do wonder whether Mark Carney maybe was told he was getting an all expenses paid trip to the French Riviera or something, because I really don't see the incentive to take this job. I mean, it's really amazing. It wasn't that long ago that Sean Lewis had this program in a bowl game, and now a case can be made that this is the worst program in FBS. There isn't a whole lot of investment from the administration or the NIL. There's not a whole lot of difference-making talent on the roster. I do like they did get a transfer running back, Jordan Newman, and he's probably the closest thing they have to a star that's on the roster. So they also have to hope that they have enough healthy bodies. I will applaud them. They are really stepping up for their road trips. Texas Tech, Florida State, and Oklahoma. Thank you and good night.
That's I think that's about all anybody can really say, right? This is a program who when I think about Mark Carney, I think he was put in a near impossible situation. Kenny Burns, 1-23 over 2 years, fired over non-football stuff, which that tells you how bad the expectations were when you get fired for non-football stuff after going 1-23 in a 2-year span. They gave him an extension after his first year where they went 1-11. So that tells you about where the priorities are for Kent State football. Athlon has them ranked 13th out of 13 in the MAC. The S&P Plus has them at 136 in the country.
Out of
When you're
136,
talking
yeah.
about, going nowhere but up, Kent State can really go nowhere but up. I think you've got to win your FCS game. You cannot go 2 years in a row where you lose an FCS game. And the FCS game they lost, that school is now making a transition to Division 3. So they weren't
Right.
even really an FCS program to begin with. They're it's just they are truly rock bottom. But I do think there are some solid pieces here. CJ Montez, Kane Williams, Jamarcus Hill, Jamon Mathis, Thomas Aiden. There are some great pieces here that they can really build with. And I think for Mark Carney, it's just, hey, our projections at 2.5 wins. Let's go from there. Let's take it one game at a time. I think Sicko's committee calls their non-conference schedule their ride to hell, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah.
Forget the 3 non-conference money games, because that's what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the games that you can win. Focus on conference play. And probably most importantly, don't lose to Akron 3 years in a row.
Correct. Correct. You do not want to lose the wagon wheel. There is a lot of hype around that. The thing with Kent, I kind of mentioned this when I released my power ratings, they were not in the negative. Last year, they were in the negative. They were the first team I ever had in my power ratings who had a negative score. And this year, they're like 0.67. So that's something that's at least a starting point. They're not negative. So let's go from there, Flashes. Let's see what can happen. Miami, one of those teams that last year was a little bit up and down, a slow start. Really kind of was putting it together end of last season. They have been one of the models of continuity in recent years, especially at quarterback. They've had Brett Gabbert for a while. So going out and getting a transfer guy like Daquan Finn, to me, was a little bit curious, but it was also fortuitous. He knows the lay of the land in the MAC because he's been at Toledo. And he went into the season last year for Baylor as the starter and then got hurt. And then Sawyer Robertson just kind of ran with the job. And now he's projected to be an all Big 12 type guy. But Daquan Finn just really made defenses look silly his first time around the league. And Miami has always been known more for its defensive acumen. So maybe having Finn under center can give the offense some pop. And that's going to be important because the entire offense turns over. But the defense should be tough again. I love the secondary. I think that Corbin Hondrew at linebacker is a name that folks are going to learn. But they're another team. They open not quite as daunting as Kent, but Wisconsin, Rutgers, and UNLV, all 3 of those are potential losses. So maybe they need to think the same way. Let's not worry too much about the non-conference and focus on maybe going on an 8-game run. There's not going to be a lot of getting acclimated, though, because of those tough games. And then November, they better build up some capital because they've got consecutive games with Ohio, Toledo, and Buffalo.
Man, I tell you what, it feels like every year for about 1,000,000 years, Brett Gabbert's been under center. It's actually dating back to 2019. So for the first time in 6 years, we're going to see a new quarterback for this team. And like you mentioned, it's a quarterback who knows this league. But I think conversely, that could make it a little bit more challenging because it's also a league who knows this quarterback.
Right.
You mentioned him getting hurt at Baylor last year. Daquan Finn tore up the record books at Toledo in 2023, transferred out. And teams weren't happy about that. Teams knew how good he was as a kind of a dual threat, almost pulled off the upset against Illinois back in 23. And this is a guy who teams are going to be excited to get another crack at. And I'm really one of the game that I have really circled on my calendar is Toledo versus Miami. The revenge game for both sides, right? It's, Miami lost to Toledo in the regular season last year. Toledo lost with Daquan Finn in the MAC championship to Miami the year before. So this is, the rubber match involving these two programs over the last 2 years. And I really think there's going to be a lot of buzz around this one. If these teams can get into this game, I don't want to say unscathed, but 1 loss, maybe 2 losses apiece, this is going to be a really high profile game with MAC championship implications.
Yeah, it certainly could be, and the potential is there for both of them. So that's
Mhm.
certainly something that I think people are going to watch closely. Moving on to Northern Illinois, they're another team that has been pretty consistent, but they're doing something that I'm not sure that they need to be doing this. The question for me is if it ain't broke, why fix it? NIU has made its bones as a physical, pounded on the ground rushing squad. They've got a guy like Telly Johnson, who I really like,
Mhm.
but it seems to me that the new OC Quinn Sanders wants to spread opponents out. I don't know that they have the personnel to really operate that way, especially with Trayvon Rudolph transferring out. To me, the offensive both lines actually look a little shaky, and in my book, that's not a good thing. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this bunch takes a pretty big step back. However, Thomas Hammock does find a way to get his guys to buy in, and they run through a brick wall for him, and they hit as hard as anybody on defense. So that is certainly something they can hang their hats on. But NIU to me is one of those teams that I wouldn't be shocked if they maybe took a little bit of a tumble just because they're doing an overhaul.
Man, this I think the target of any team in the MAC this year is biggest for Northern Illinois. And not because of the turnover, it's because they're doing what at the end of the year? They're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So Northern Illinois, if you're the Huskies and you're Thomas Hammock, you want to come through and give the wave goodbye to the conference
Yeah,
as you run off with the trophy. But conversely, the conference wants to have them finish below Kent State and Akron. So
yeah,
I think that we're going to see, Josh Holst, Ethan Hampton, they're going to be battling it out for this quarterback spot, and whoever can get that spot, I think that's going to be telling. I think you do get you do get some great pieces back, but this Northern Illinois team, it's going to be very very up and down, I think. I'm not too high on their overall potential. I think that they've got a great game against Maryland to start the year. That last time they played at Maryland at night, they pulled off that victory. Or last time they played Maryland at night, rather, I believe that was actually in Northern Illinois. So, but there's a good opportunity for them to kind of get a relative statement win to kind of start the season. But this is going to be tough sledding for Northern Illinois. I'm looking at their schedule right now. They've got Mississippi State right after the Maryland game, and
mm-hmm.
then San Diego State at home, and then you get Miami, Ohio. Then you get Miami, Ohio. You get a road game against Eastern. Then you're at Ohio. I mean, the MAC did not give them too many scheduling favors when it
No,
came to conference play. They're making them travel to UMass. And I'm sure that was not a coincidence.
yeah,
But they're making them travel to UMass after playing at Toledo on a midweek game for a midweek game.
yeah,
So it's the
yeah.
MAC did them no favors with scheduling. And again, I'm sure that was intentional. But this is going to be a fun year. You get the gimme win with Holy Cross, but I really love this Maryland game. That's the one to keep an eye on. And we'll see. Mississippi State got their jaws popped by Toledo last year. They're not looking to do that 2 years in a row to a MAC school, but I think you're right. Northern Illinois, known for their defense, they've had some great offensive showcases over the years, but they're going to win a lot of games because of their defense. It's just going to be how much can the offense keep up.
Yeah, and you mentioned quarterback Ethan Halleck, I believe, or Ethan Hampton went to Illinois. I think he
That's
did a
right. He
late
did
transfer to
transfer out. That's
Illinois.
right.
So I think
I
Holst is
misspoke.
pretty
I
much the guy.
apologize.
Yeah, Holst is the guy, and
Yep.
he doesn't have a ton of experience, but you know what? Hammock has been able to pull rabbits out of his hat before.
Yeah.
So, but the reasons that you give, every team is going to be shooting for NIU because it's like, you know what? You should have stuck around. We will give you a going away present. So we will see how that goes. Ohio U, defending champions, and as you said, 50 years for the Bobcats. So they are walking around proud, and they should. And you know what? The minute Parker Navarro decided to return, they were labeled again as one of the co-favorites for the MAC crown.
Mm-hmm.
They won 11 games last year. Really, 2 years in a row, they've had double-digit wins. And the non-league slate, though it is ambitious with Rutgers, West Virginia, and Ohio State, in league play, they miss Toledo and Buffalo, and they get Miami at home. So it does set up for them fairly nicely. I do think the defense took a few hits, but the offense should be very good with Navarro and getting Sia Bangura back. He was their leading rusher in 2023. That I think is going to be a major factor for them.
I think that's going to be a major factor. And you mentioned some of those non-conference games. I've got a fun little statistic for you. Since 2022, Ohio is 17-1 at home. That includes a Power 4 win over Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia travels to Peden Stadium in the second week of the college football season after Ohio comes back from Rutgers. And I was talking to somebody else about this earlier. West Virginia, they play Pitt in the backyard brawl the week after this Ohio game.
Yes.
This one feels like it's setting up to be what could be a very exciting football game. That could go either way. Again, you're tough on Frank Solich Field. Just one loss in the last 3 seasons. West Virginia might be looking ahead a little bit. I think it's great that West Virginia is traveling to Peden. I wish more Power 4 opponents would do that. It seems like we're getting that less and less. But I really love that West Virginia is doing this. So hats off to them. They're also getting a coaching change with West Virginia, with Rich Rodriguez stepping into the helm once again. You mentioned Brian Smith kind of earlier with the coaching changes. I don't know how much of a change this is. I know Tim Albin took several of the coaches from Ohio when he went to Charlotte, but it looks like Brian Smith kept a good chunk of his coaches from this offense that won 11 games a year ago.
Yeah.
An offense that's won 10 plus games the last 3 seasons. So this is not a bad offense. It's now going to see how much can the defense keep up, because I'm starting to get the vibes that this is going to be that kind of high scoring, let's win by just scoring more points than everybody else. And they can do it. There's some good pieces coming back. I think, and this is a bold take, and I recognize this, it's not overly insane to say that Ohio could potentially start the season 3-1. Mm-hmm. I really don't think that, I don't know much about Rutgers. I know that they're kind of riding that ship a little bit right now, but West Virginia, you get them at the right time. You can pretty much chalk up Ohio State as a loss. But then you get Gardner-Webb at home before you start conference play. I really, really like this non-conference slate. 3 Power 4 opponents with 2 winnable Power 4 opponents.
Yeah, and Rutgers has had some problems at quarterback, so their offense is not necessarily, if OU does decide to go that let's outscore people route, Rutgers is a team that does have trouble scoring. So I'm with you. I'm actually, my plan right now is to be at Peden Stadium on
Nice.
September 6th, just because Ohio State plays Grambling that week. I don't need to see that game. I know how that game's going to go. And I've not been to Athens probably for 10 or 12 years. So it's a great campus. It's actually the only other school I applied to besides Ohio State. So, so I kind of have a little bit of a soft spot. And as for Brian Smith, this is how Ohio has done things. They've elevated. I mean, they elevated Tim Albin after Frank Solich, and they're elevating Brian Smith. It's a continuity thing. And I think it can be, especially if you've got a baked-in culture, it can be a good approach, and it's certainly worked for them.
Well, and I think I was just going to say, to that point, just real quick, that's what works for Ohio. Like, Frank Solich did a phenomenal job building the program back up to being just respected in the Mid-American Conference. Tim Albin took it to the next level, got him to the MAC championship, got him a championship, their first one in over 50 years, dating back to 1968. Which, you think about how long ago that was. Marshall was still in the MAC the first time, the last time Ohio won a championship, which is just insane to think about. But yeah, it's just all of this it works. And then you keep a lot of players too. Not too many guys entered the transfer portal that aren't returning, and some guys are coming back, as you mentioned. So this was the right move by Ohio to just elevate from within and kind of keep this football team together.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Toledo, Jason Candle does not enjoy losing 5 games. They went 8-5. They had big expectations last year. And especially when one of those losses is, as we touched on before, that head scratcher against Akron to end the season. Now, their offense kind of flamed out offensively down the stretch, and it is going to need to find a rhythm. But getting Tucker Gleason back should help a lot. And they have a really dynamic duo, probably the best 1-2 combo in the league in Junior Vander Ross and Trayvon Rudolph, who I mentioned before, who left Northern Illinois. He is now at Toledo. They also have churned out NFL caliber defensive backs in recent seasons, including Quinyon Mitchell, who everyone was a huge fan of, just because he was so good and he proved everyone right by being named an all rookie choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maxon Hook got drafted in this last draft. Both of them coincidentally play for the Eagles. The one to watch this year is Avery Smith. He was a second team All MAC choice last year, and I think he might be the guy to make the leap into public consciousness this season. So that secondary is not just good for the MAC. It is one of the top secondaries in college football. All five guys return, led by Smith. And I just think that that is a really, really good unit. I am interested to see how they fare in their opener at Kentucky, because Kentucky is down heading into 2025. And we've seen Toledo beat Mississippi State and challenge some other SEC teams. So that one is going to, I think, maybe even if you can have a tone setter in week one, that might be it.
Well, and I think you mentioned it, Avery Smith, and I was going to bring him up. Unbelievable. It's nobody talks about the MAC for their defensive players. That's just, let's be very candid about it. If you're going to the NFL, you're probably an offensive player or you're a lineman. You're a big beefy guy. And that's great. That's all well and good. But Toledo has cranked out so many defensive players, not just getting into the league, but getting drafted into the league.
Yeah.
And that's been such a huge feather. Hats off to Jason Candle. Currently tied with Gary Pinkel for most wins all time in Toledo history, can set that, or can take sole possession of first place on August 30th against Kentucky. But I really like this non-conference schedule for Toledo. Kentucky, you're on the road. You get Western Kentucky the following week at home, and then you get Morgan State. I like Toledo opening with a quality name opponent. This is something that I've been critical of Toledo in the past. They always open against, no offense, a Long Island University or a VMI. Somebody who it's like, okay, yeah, that's nice that we got the win, or a Texas Southern. Great, we got the win, but let's play somebody that, that's going to be a little bit more important to our season. Getting a 66-3 win over Texas Southern is great. But if you can grind out a 25-22 win over Western Kentucky, a team who, for all intents and purposes, could be competing with you for a college football playoff spot, that I think has a lot more excitement around it than that of a Morgan State or somebody like that.
Yeah, you don't learn a whole lot about your team in those wins. So Candle will know after week one, hey, I got something here, or we got to maybe go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Well, and I think you mentioned, Trayvon Rudolph and Junior Vander Ross. This is already telling me we're going to see Jerwan Newton, Junior Vander Ross all over again. With Tucker Gleason, another year under his belt, a season to really prove himself. Tucker, for all intents and purposes, a solid quarterback. I don't think he's anywhere near NFL talent, but he's a solid college football quarterback. And this is an opportunity for him to write his name into a few record books at Toledo and to make a statement. You're going to have the pieces. You're going to have offensive linemen who can finally give you an opportunity to kind of to protect yourself a little bit. Ethan Spooth coming back. I really like him. He's done a great job on that offensive line. Feel like he's been there for forever. They've got a couple other pieces coming in as well. But again, Chip Trainum, that for me is the big running back name. Again, like we mentioned, played for Kentucky last year, was the hero for Ohio State 2 years ago in South Bend. Get him going, get him to be an integral part of this offense. And watch him go. He's going to have other help. Hudson Miller from Purdue, and then Kenji Christian also coming in. This is a really exciting team, and if you can get the pieces falling the right way, Toledo's got a pretty favorable schedule. That a game at Washington State in the middle of the season, right before Northern Illinois isn't ideal, but it's right after Kent State. So you're not getting
Right.
too beat up against Kent State, hopefully, if you're Toledo. You're not worried about your rivalry game with Bowling Green. That's in the rearview mirror. But then you close out the season with Miami, Ball State, and Central Michigan. I think the one you're most worried about after Northern Illinois is Miami.
Mhm.
So this is a solid schedule for Toledo, and we've seen stranger things happen. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Moving on, UMass back for a second go round in the MAC. They are obviously the newest addition to the league. They could find the going rough. They won just twice last year now. Joe Harasmiak, defensive-minded coach. He mined the portal to upgrade the talent and was successful. He's
Mhm.
had success before as a head coach, notably at Maine, where he had a really swarming defense. They were aggressive. He's going to, because of the talent deficit that they're going to be at most weeks, I think he wants to make foes uncomfortable. So look for them to do a lot of blitzing on defense. The offense, I guess there's no simple way to put this. It just is not very good. And the schedule isn't conducive to too many victories. But by season's end, if he has gotten them to buy in, they could prove to be a tough out on the back end of the schedule as the players get comfortable with the new system.
Man, this UMass team, I'm excited. I don't know that they add a lot of value football wise to the Mid American Conference, just being very frank. But I do think having that Northeast market, at
Mm-hmm.
least a portion of it, there's value there. So I think this was a solid move by the MAC to bring in UMass and to get them for all sports, because now you get really quality field hockey, you get really quality basketball. I
Mm-hmm.
think that was you have to look past football. A lot of people question this move. You have to look past football. Yes, that's your breadwinner, but you're getting nationally relevant programs in other sports. I believe UMass was Elite Eight or Final Four in women's field hockey last year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing to have, and somebody to finally challenge Miami for the crown in women's field hockey in the MAC. But I really think that, you have a half a dozen or a half a billion transfers for UMass this season. You're ranked 12th by Athlon Sports, 135th in S&P Plus. I don't know what you do, but you have to find some conference wins in your first year. You don't have the easiest schedule. You got Temple, you got Bryan, and then you're at Iowa and at Missouri for your
Mm-hmm.
non-conference. I see at best 2-2, but most likely 1-3. But then you kick off your conference slate with Western Michigan. I think you're starting 1-4, and then you get Kent State. You have to win the Kent State game.
Yeah.
You lose that, then that's bad news bears. That's really setting a
Yeah.
bad tone for the rest of the season. I think Buffalo, you probably lose that game. Um, Central Michigan's going to be tougher the later the further along the season goes. So I think you lose that
Mm-hmm.
one. I think Akron is the other one. I think that's your other conference win. If you find 2 conference wins in year one and maybe just pull off a stunner against, a Northern Illinois or against a Bowling Green, you do avoid Toledo, you do avoid Miami. So that's huge. But I think you pull off a win against one of those other 2 and get to maybe 3 conference wins. I think that's a successful year for UMass.
Oh yeah, and I liken UMass's entry similar to what Maryland and Rutgers have done for the Big Ten. Neither has been great at football, but they've brought a presence in basketball certainly,
Mm-hmm.
and they have had. I mean, Maryland is another one at men's lacrosse, really,
Yeah.
really good program at Maryland, and Rutgers is also good at some other things. But as you said, people are so football centric that if those programs aren't getting it done, people go, well, that's not a great fit. But
Yeah.
most of these athletic departments have 20, 25 sports,
Mm-hmm.
and they know that while football pays the freight, if you're good at some of the others, you can still be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Last team we are looking at is Western Michigan. There's a lot of real intrigue here. I think especially on offense. The roster has been upgraded.
Hmm.
Christian Leary from Georgia Tech comes in. He started his career at Alabama.
Yeah.
And Cole Cabana, who is at running back, he comes in from Michigan, and he could be a really nice complement to all MAC talent Jalen Buckley. Western had a nice 1-2 punch in the backfield last year, and they could have the same thing. Now they are having to replace Hayden Wolf. It's probably going to be Brock Lowry, who
Yeah.
does have a little bit of playing experience, but that is a pretty important position to make over. The defense was not good last year. It allowed 31 points or more 6 times, but they do have a great safety duo in Tate Halleck and Aaron Wofford. So there are some pieces on the defense, and if they can just improve by maybe 4 or 5 points a game, and if the offense can be consistent, I think Western's a team that might have sleeper potential.
Western's one of my dark horses for this year. And for all the reasons you just said, you get Jalen Buckley back, Cole Cabana, obviously didn't have much that he did at Michigan. But when you're in a backfield that includes a Donovan Edwards and Caleb Mullins or whatever, it's hard to find room, right? Let's just be very honest.
Well, he had a great spring game. Cabana had a great spring game.
Yeah. So, I think there's an opportunity here for this Western Michigan running back room to be one of the most dangerous in the Mid-American Conference this year. But it's going to depend on how good your quarterback play is. Just as you aptly mentioned, replacing Hayden Wolf, who did great for Western, that's tough. Western went to a bowl game last year, lost the bowl game, but I really like Lance Taylor. I think he's doing a lot of right things to kind of rebuild this program. Tim Lester, I think, the previous coach was put in a near impossible situation. You take over at your alma mater where you were a star in the Chad Pennington era. There's a throwback for you.
Right.
But you take over a PJ Fleck program who turned 0 win 1 stars into a national, a Cotton Bowl contender. And then things just kind of started going south. You didn't have the same PJ Fleck magic. Whereas I think it was good to bring in Lance Taylor. I love Tim Lester. Tim Lester is phenomenal. But I love the Lance Taylor hire. And I think that you're going to continue to see them improve. He's 10 and 15 overall. That this is just going to be another, let's stack a few more things on top of this. Let's keep moving the right direction. Watch out for Western Michigan this year. Defense, they're going to be improved. I have no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a better defense. This offense, you get the right guy under center, watch out. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the conference.
Yeah, the pieces are certainly there. I sat at Bowling Green Stadium last year in November in about 12 degrees to watch Harold Phantom play Western Michigan.
Yep.
And even though BG won the game pretty easily, you could see Buckley. You could see that they had a few pieces there that they could be a challenge the following season, and this is the following season. So they are one I am definitely watching as well. Let's move on to true false now. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you can tell me whether you think they are true or false. The first one, Kent State will go winless.
False.
I tend to agree because, like you said, they do have an FCS team on the roster on the schedule. But if they do lose that, then Katie bar the door, because I don't see UMass as, I guess, the other opportunity really for them. So that one, I think there's a possibility. It probably won't happen, but it's a possibility. Number 2, there will be a MAC upset of a power conference opponent.
This is 100% true. Happens almost every year. You can almost you don't know who, but you can almost always chalk it up.
Certainly that OU West Virginia game, Toledo, Kentucky. Those would look like the 2 best, but there are a few other sneaky ones that are playing. That they could do some things. Miami has a chance to do one too, so we'll see. We've talked about him already. Chip Trayanum will lead the MAC in rushing.
False.
So you do like him, but is it because you don't think that there will be enough emphasis on the ground game, or it'll be a committee, or you just think that there are guys who are more established who might be able to put up better numbers?
I think that it's going to depend on the offense is going to run through Tucker Gleason at
Right.
Toledo, and Tucker Gleason has recently shown a little bit more of kind of a, hey, I'm going to look to pass, but I can also run too, and that's another weapon in that Toledo offense that's going to really benefit the Rockets. So I think there's going to be an emphasis and there's going to be an upgrade. It's going to depend on that offensive line, and it's going to depend on how much Jason Candle wants to throw. If we get late into games, of course he's going to rack up yards. But if we get into games where Toledo's in a dogfight, there's not going to be a lot of running. There's going to be a lot of passing. Jason Candle is somebody I think who learned from his mistakes. He tried the ground game too much last year, and I think it bit him a little bit. He's going to shy away from that this year, and he's going to turn to the air a little bit more.
Certainly possible. Fourth, Eddie George will have Bowling Green in contention for a spot in the league title game this season.
I'm going to say false. Just because of the talent that he's had to replace. But yeah, anything can happen, right? But I'm going to say false for this one.
And last but not least, the MAC champion will grab an auto berth to the college football playoff.
I haven't looked at the other conferences and their schedules yet, but I certainly would love to say true. I'm going to say false, but I would love to say true. I just don't think it's there this year.
Right. It would have to be an 11-1 Toledo with a win over Kentucky, an 11-1 OU with a win over West Virginia. It's going to have to be a team that beats a power conference opponent and wins 11 games. Yeah. Preferably, I mean, if OU were to somehow go undefeated, that would mean a win over Ohio State and West Virginia. Shoo them in right away, and they're probably not even the 5 seed. They're probably, well, they're going to do straight seeding this year, but they won't be the 12th. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I think Toledo and probably Ohio probably have the best chances. And right. I think Ohio is the one who gets the most grace because of Ohio State, because you lose that Ohio State game, you still knock off, based off of your schedule, 2 other Power 4 opponents in Rutgers and West Virginia. So I think they're the ones with the most grace on that that berth.
Sure. Moving on now to the title game. It seems like it's a couple of different teams every year. Ohio had it last year. I think Toledo was expected to be there, didn't make it. I think that happens this year. Toledo versus Ohio. I do think the Rockets win. As much as I like Ohio's roster, getting Parker Navarro back, and the fact that it will be battle tested by that schedule we've talked about, I just think Toledo has the league's best roster. And here's a fun fact. You gave one out before. The last time the Rockets lost 5 games in 2022, they followed it up with an 11-win season. That is not out of the question.
No, it's very much not. And I'll continue to add to your fun facts for your listeners. They're getting all sorts of education tonight.
Yeah.
I also think it's Toledo and Ohio. Toledo and Ohio played in the 2022 MAC championship. And if this prediction holds true, only 3 teams will have played in the MAC championship the last 4 years: Ohio, Toledo, and Miami.
There you go. They're just kind of rotating around. It's like, okay, one year we'll just sort of play that round robin sort of thing, and
exactly,
we're not going to let anyone else infringe.
And all of them have won a title, which is crazy.
Yes. In my Power 4 previews, I've been talking about CFP contenders and berths because we know those 4 leagues are all going to get at least 1 and probably 2. Yeah. SEC Big Ten will get more than that. For the Group of 5 leagues, it really comes down to contenders, and we just sort of touched on it. To me, Toledo looks to me as if it would have enough strength of schedule if it beats Kentucky. And Ohio, like you talked about with the grace, if they lose to Ohio State, especially if it's competitive, maybe a 2-touchdown, 17-point loss, and they have wins over Rutgers and West Virginia, they could certainly be in the mix. I just don't see a real path for a MAC team to steal the auto bid, especially when you've got Boise looking to go back. UNLV is going to be improved with Dan Mullen. James Madison's going to be formidable. Tulane, Navy. There's all sorts of teams that, I mean, we both love the MAC, but we have to face it. Those are higher profile conferences, the Sun Belt and the American and the Mountain West. And as such, they are probably going to get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt.
I think they're going to get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. But to your point, with Boise State, I think we're going to see possibly, and this is an unbelievably hot take. If we get undefeated Boise State versus a one-loss UNLV in the Mountain West Championship, and UNLV wins that thing, I would not be shocked to see UNLV get the auto bid and Boise State somehow steal an at-large bid.
Well, especially if Boise is to go undefeated in the regular season, that would be a win over Notre Dame, and that would certainly help. So that would certainly upset the apple cart, because we know the powers that be don't want to put a whole lot of group of 5 teams in. They're grudgingly letting one in. So if there were to be 2, then their heads might explode. So
well, that's why they're going to keep changing the system until it till it eliminates them. But that's another conversation for another time.
Definitely. Well, thanks for coming on, Alex. Always fun to have you on. If people want to find you, tell them where they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you so much. You've always done incredible work, and I appreciate the chance to kind of share some of my quote unquote knowledge, if you will. So thank you so much for having me on. But if anybody wants to listen and check out what I do, my co-host Graham and I, my best friend from college, run the Mac Sports Connection. And, like we've talked about here all night, all we talk is Maction. And we don't just talk football, we'll talk basketball. Graham did this baseball season, a big baseball segment where he did a recap after every single MAC tournament baseball game. And we just, we really love this league. We were built by it. I'm going to be a 2-time MAC graduate, so it's a league that's very near and dear to my heart. But if anybody wants to listen, you can check us out on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and the Varsity Network app. We are part of the Varsity Podcast Network, so you can listen to us for free through that network app.
All right. Well, again, good to have you. For those of you watching on YouTube, please punch the like and subscribe buttons. And for those of you who are just listening, subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so that you will not be left out of the loop next time. Alex, again, thanks for coming back. We will be back next week to preview another group of 5 conference. So until then, everybody, later.